or even the Molotov cocktails at their own people, in order to get the rest of you doing that, which gives the excuse for repression. And these people from all three countries had numerous examples of, in all three cases, dictatorships sending among their ranks people dressed up, look like the people, groovy as their students or whatever, and then like ignite that under the pressure of events. So what their advice, though, from all three countries was, don't kill them. Which is different, like a self-respecting terrorist organization, the IRA and others, in the olden days, would, they would kill those people. And so these folks, though, were saying, don't kill them, neutralize them. And part of it, because family is such a resource for, in some of those societies, go after their families and get their families to control them. So these were all coming out of their practical experience of things that worked for them at different moments and different times. And we're trying to make this list so that everybody could learn from everybody else. Control your fear. Sing songs, etc., because if you show your fear, that will encourage the bullies among the opposition to move in on you. Don't run away. That was such an interesting one, because I don't know if you've been in, some of you may have been in these situations. I've been in plenty of situations where the police are coming at us and arming them. And there's a tremendous wish to run away. I think there's something called fight or flight, right? And if you decided the fighting doesn't make sense, then you really, there's something very deep. That's what it says. Run away, run away. Okay, don't. All three countries said. That eggs them on. And they chase you harder and beat you harder. Which was also the experience in many, many countries. It was one of the things learned in the Civil Rights Movement in the Deep South in the U.S. When the Ku Klux Klan come after you, or the local police or whatever, don't run. It encourages them to come faster and harder and beat you up more thoroughly. So, and if you're next to somebody who starts to run away, grab them and keep them there. Get them to sit down, because it's hard to it's harder to run away if you're sitting down. Among many of my Buddhist friends in Thailand, one of their favorite things was to start a meditative chant, like get people cross-legged on the street doing a meditative chant. And I said, then what's that about? They said, it's hard to run away if you're on your knees. And of course, Christians do that kind of thing too, that prayer. So, Dr. King loved to get people on their knees so they couldn't run away. Don't insult police and soldiers. Tell soldiers on the street something positive. You are not the enemy. You are with us. We are with you. We are the people. Use positive expressions instead of cursing them. People in the front of the line, talk directly to the soldiers. Give them water, give them food, give them flowers. Reach out, reach out, reach out. Put monks in the front. For this country, put monks in the front. And they say that really works. Also, put children in the front, women. Put students in the front. You'll be happy with that. And put retired army vets in the front, wearing their old uniforms. And that also reduces the amount of repression they've been experiencing. When the women are in the front lines, they tell, I don't understand that. And then get highly respected people who are respected by both sides to do an intervention. To just like walk right in the middle and whatever. To get the troops back off. International participation helps. It helps when people with a skin like mine show up, obviously international, because that gets the message across that the world's watching. And so on. I could publicize the suffering that you experienced yesterday. Don't be stoical and say, oh, it doesn't hurt. And the leader can target the leader, even in a particular, at a particular barricade, the person who's kind of leading the charge, can target themselves deliberately to clarify this will be murder if you do what you're threatening to do. The Burmese students were particularly effective at this. I met several who had done this personally in that training, and later when I worked with Burmese. And that was earlier, actually, when I worked with Burmese students in 1990. They would go up to somebody, characteristic leaders were, you know, line of soldiers, and they're all holding their weapons, and the commanders behind them about to order them to shoot. And the leading student would especially be expected to go up to one of the soldiers with a gun out there, rip apart the shirt, and say, "If you're going to start shooting, start with me." Website or something if you want to have a note on it. But one of the things that just really inspired me was that people who have been through so much, yes, you can say, well, people should learn from their experience, but a lot of people who are through trauma don't learn much from it because the emotional impact prevents the learning process. And then they either revisit the suffering on somebody else. That's this, a long history of child abuse, right? But also, or will numb out and simply retreat and not be available to the next insurgency, the next movement, the next group of people ready to stand up for themselves. So trauma tends to be, to really lower the growth curve. But what we need in the world, of course, is high growth curves, right? Learn as fast as we can. Your generation especially has so much quick learning to do in order to cope with your own future. And so I was impressed, and I still don't understand it. Sometimes people ask, well, George, how can people go through what Cambodians went through and have that growth? And how can they keep learning as they do? And I don't know. Maybe it's the Buddhism, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. I don't really know. That's where my expertise, as President Obama says, that's somebody with a higher pay grade than me. But it leaves me in awe. It leaves me very humble when I run into that. So, okay, I get to be invited back and back and back because my experience in Southeast Asia has been the first time a trainer from outside comes, you're really on audition, and then they say at the end, "Thank you very much," and you never hear from them again. And on the other hand, if it worked, they invite you back. And so I was invited back. And I'd like to jump ahead, because I'm going to leave time for questions, to tell you particularly, just before I jump way ahead, I'll jump to '94, when a Canadian colleague who has a lot of experience in police state situations and I were invited back to Cambodia, this time to work with an extraordinary, again, upwelling, I think of it as an upwelling of the Cambodian spirit, in terms of empowering people who were caught in contested areas. While the Khmer Rouge was still a live and viable fighting force on the one hand, but the government was a quite different force, sponsored by the Vietnam government, actually. So you had the government army and the Khmer Rouge guerrilla army, and at some places in the country, of course, it would be unclear who was really in charge. And can you imagine being a villager, being a farmer in an area like that, when, you know, 1 month it would be the government forces coming across and demanding your loyalty, et cetera, et cetera. And the next month it would be the guerrilla forces coming and demanding your loyalty. And chances are taking your water buffalo on which you're dependent. And there you are. Now, how do people stand up to that, especially in a rural area where you don't really have a critical mass of population? So it was an extremely intimidating situation. Mahako Sananda, who luckily was out of the country during the Holocaust, and therefore whose life was saved. They rubbed out as much of the Buddhist clergy, Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge just rubbed people out if they were clergy and if they could be found, which they mostly could be. Pol Pot murdered all the teachers that they could possibly find, anybody who knew French or was cosmopolitan in any way, medical doctors, anybody with professions based in, as they thought, the West. Those folks were rubbed out as fully as they could be, plus many